In the middle of the steppe, a single figure walked across the cracked, scorched earth. The sun annihilated even shadows. The man's face gleamed with sweat, yet he seemed to be cloaked in a dark shadow. He carried no sack. He held nothing in his hands, but his steps were heavy. He bore an invisible burden on his back: regret. Every step recalled the horror of a plague that had swept through a village years ago. The village had been quarantined, every house turned into a tomb. That night, he had seen a frail woman lying in bed, her breathing heavy, trapped by desperation and the fear of contagion. As he locked the door, her weak, trusting gaze had been etched into his mind. It wasn't a whisper, but an echo, a single, repeating sentence. She trusted you. You left her there for your own life.
He stopped at a bend in the road. He was near the land he once fled from, the place he tried to erase from memory. It was as if an unknown force had pulled him back to this scorched steppe, to the very path still soaked with the scent of his past. Ahead of him, a figure crawled through the dry grass, an old woman. One leg was bandaged, her wounds bearing signs of the plague. Her face was covered in dust. She carried not a basket, but a cloth soaked with blood. She didn't lift her head, but her lips moved. The man heard nothing, but felt everything. He knelt, approached her quietly, and lifted her onto his back. And he walked on that same road, as if fate had led him to it. A small, broken-down shack. No door, only its shadow remained. He carried the woman inside, laid her down. She closed her eyes. Then a whisper was heard. "Here, behind the shelf, bring the little tin box." He stood, walked over to the dusty shelves. His fingers touched a box. It was cold. He opened it. Inside, wrapped in pitch-black cloth, was something. He lifted it. A red stone. On the stone, under the light, a delicate engraving slowly revealed itself, a familiar interwoven motif. His heart skipped. This motif, he couldn't place it, but it echoed inside him. "It's not yours. She trusted you." The whisper was louder now. When he turned back to the woman, she was in a deep sleep, breathing but unconscious. He placed the box into his sack. His heart was pounding, and the motif on the stone had burned itself into his mind. He looked away, then stepped quietly outside the door. He didn't look back. He had realized something, but had to deny it. This had to be nothing more than a disturbing coincidence. Behind the house, in the shadow, there were eyes. Not the woman's, but a child's eyes. They stayed silent, but they never forgot. The shadow followed the man's retreating figure, like a silent witness to a secret, its outlines stretching quietly behind him. Every time he looked at the stone, his head would spin. The images inside him became clearer, the screams of plague victims, rising flames, a door being locked, and a familiar pair of eyes full of trust. The motif on the stone sharpened, matching fragments of memories buried in his mind. "Why did you leave me?" The woman's voice now felt painfully familiar. The weight of the stone was not in his hand, it was in his soul. Each whisper cut deeper, each vision opened another invisible wound. The stone burned in his palm like fire. The man set out to sell the stone in a marketplace, but with every step the voices grew louder. "What did you do to her? She was alone. He watched." At one point he took the stone out of his pocket, ready to throw it into a well, but he couldn't. His hand trembled. The stone, it felt glued to his palm, bound by unseen chains, pulling him downward into his own darkness. There was no escape. Each time he tried to throw it, the motif became more vivid, suffocating him. That motif, why did it disturb him so deeply? He woke in the night, trembling in the grip of nightmares. The woman was no longer in his dream. She was standing at the edge of his bed, a silhouette. Her face was visible, and that face, it was the same face burned into his memory, the last gaze from that plague-stricken night. Years ago, the plague. The woman he locked inside, the one he left behind in fear, was his mother. That old woman, the same eyes, the same hands. The nightmare became a bloody truth. The chains of his conscience wrapped around his throat. He couldn't breathe. Even with his eyes closed, his mother's helpless face was etched into his soul. The man returned to the shack, but the shack was gone. In its place stood a pile of stones, and beside that pile stood the child. The child said nothing, but in his eyes the man saw everything: guilt, fear, impunity. The man fell to his knees. He took out the red stone. The motif on it now looked like a sunflower, judging him, and he quietly laid it on the earth. At that moment, the child picked up a small, flat stone and gently placed it beside the red one. Their eyes met. In the child's eyes, there was no longer pure anger, but a deep, aged understanding born from confrontation. In that look, the man understood his future, if not forgiven, was at least acknowledged. As the child walked away in silence, he left behind a shadow that would never fade, a mark etched into the man's conscience, an eternal reminder. The child vanished. The man was left alone. And then the sky darkened. The birds fell silent. Even the wind changed direction, as if the whole world mourned with him, the earth, the sky, everything. But the man didn't run, because he no longer feared punishment. He feared escaping it. He knew now that the real sentence was the never-ending reckoning within, a scream echoing through the depths of his soul. The next morning, a man sat at the edge of the village. With his bare feet, he drew lines in the soil, the weariness of his journey still etched in his hands. He held nothing, but his face was calm for the first time, a deep, melancholic calm, like the stillness that follows a storm. And just in front of him, from the very spot where he had laid the stone, a strange flower had bloomed, its petals velvet black, with a deep crimson stain at its heart, as if it had grown from the stone itself, from the very core of his sin. On the surface of the flower, a faint sunflower motif could just be seen, a faded memory. Each morning, this flower would bloom again, a silent monument, a reminder of the shadowed truth he could never escape. His eyes were fixed on the horizon. One thought echoed within him, like a whisper on the dry wind. Every act of kindness pays off a debt. But then came a sharper thought, one that carved itself into his mind like a scar. But every settled debt is only the beginning of a deeper cost, and the wounds opened in his soul would now bleed into eternity. The man sat silently among the shadows. The flower before him swayed like the dark seal of his fate. There was no end to the punishment, no true peace, only an eternal cycle. The shadow of his past had soaked into every fiber of his soul, and he was no longer just a man, he was a living monument. And what about you? Can you dare to escape the shackles of your own conscience? Remember, sometimes the greatest price is not the one paid, but the one that can never be paid.